Alright, so the idea of this video came to my mind when I was thinking about how we were buying games 12, 15 years ago, when the game media were not that well developed. Uh, that time, the only sources of information about games were talking to friends, reading gaming magazines. I don't know if somebody remembers them. Watching and reading some very limited materials about games, and generally not knowing what you are buying or what you are going to play. And there was something about that time, isn't it? Uh, Today, the situation has changed completely. We know everything about the games before they are released. We know who the characters are, what the gameplay looks like, who are the developers. We watch a lot of interviews with them, and it's different from that times. And I thought it would be quite interesting to have some sort of an experiment when I try to play some game and make a review of it without knowing a thing about it. And in order to accommodate this experience, I decided to develop a set of rules for myself. So the first one, I pick a game that I know nothing about, like literally not even the title. The second one, I watch no reviews or gameplays, so I know nothing about the process of the playing. The third rule is I buy the game immediately in the store, well, in the digital store. That should replicate the experience how it was when you come to a physical store, you look at the boxes of the games, at the screenshots, you read the description, and then you pick a game. You don't think about it like for a day or two if you need the game. I'll be honest with you, when I was browsing through the PS Store, it appeared not that easy to pick a game that I have heard nothing about. It works that way nowadays that we hear and know at least something about all the major titles in the gaming industry. And picking something that you have never heard about was a bit complicated. But at the end of the day, I ended up with a short list and then just picking a game, and I ended up with a game called Pacific Drive. I was attracted by the visuals and the style from screenshots. I sort of liked the description, the idea of driving in the zone, and generally, I thought the game should be story oriented, and generally, I like it. And yeah, before you start writing that this is a very popular game and how could I miss it, my answer would be we all miss some things. And if you have a problem with that, go fuck. One of the games that I was thinking about while picking the game for such an experiment was FIREWATch, because I thought that would be great to have some very calm and cozy game for such an experiment with very interesting and catching story and nice visuals. And how big was my disappointment to learn that Pacific Drive is not FIREWATch. It's a completely different game, it's a completely different genre. Of course, this is not a problem of the game, but just from the visuals and from the description, it looked like that. But whatever. So, as I said, Pacific Drive is a survival game, with you being trapped into the zone with anomalies, and you have to figure out what's going on and explore the zone and basically get out. And in order to do that, the game provides you with a car and a garage as your sort of base, where you can craft and improve things, as well as a bunch of scientists, Tobias, Oppie, and Francis. Basically, they move the story forward as they guide you through the zone and they help you here and there. And of course, as usually happens in these kind of games, particularly you are the person who can escape the zone because who else would do that? And the more you travel across the zone, the more anomalies, the more things you see, the more you communicate with your partners, and the more they tell you about what's going on and what happened to the entire area. I think I will not miss if I say that the great source of inspiration for the game probably served the Gravity Falls series, because you immediately recognize all this vibe, the style, anomalies, generally the atmosphere, and the environment of the west part of the US, which looks amazing, I would say. However, I cannot say that the story is the strongest part of the game. Actually, I think the story is kind of weak here. I mean, it's not stupid, it's just sort of shallow, and personally for me, it was not really interesting to follow it. There are interesting ideas and topics that the characters discuss, but generally there is nothing that would blow your mind out. It is a story of scientists who developed something they could not control and what it all resulted in, and basically their revelations all about it. However, I'll be honest with you, I expected more from the story. And the reason for that is Usually, small indie games tell way better and way smarter stories. They touch you way stronger. But in this case, it's just a story. It's just average. It's okay, but nothing special. And the ending of the game, well, I'm not going to spoiler it, but it's just, oh, yeah, okay, thank you for informing me. From my opinion, the main problem of the story is the way it is presented. You communicate with your partners via a radio, but the problem is you are not really speaking. In fact, you are literally nobody. You don't have a body, you don't have a voice, you don't have an opinion. All you do is you drive across the zone and you listen to somebody else's problems. Of course, you may say this is the way the writers are telling the story, but the problem is you do not participate in the story completely. You don't agree or you don't disagree with the characters. You have nothing. You don't have the relationship building. You're just executing others people's orders and just working as a psychologist to listen to their problems.
What now?
How about launching the car into Cappy's core?
I'm sorry. What?
It's simple. The driver jumps the car into the heart of the anomaly, and if I time it right, I'll open the gateway and extract them.
And if you don't?
I've run some calculations. I think it should be fine. Anyway, it's like they always say, what's an experiment without some risk of total annihilation?
Who says that exactly?
Probably this kind of storytelling is not the worst possible, but I think it played a bad joke with the writers. I think you cannot leave the communication with the distant characters that you don't see without actually engaging in it. Because at the end of the day, it resulted basically in a podcast and not participating at all. In fact, nothing that you do affects the story. Slightly moving to the gameplay part already. Again, the problem is here that the gameplay and the story are very disconnected. And that's why it even adds up on being disconnected and detached from the main line. So the more you travel and the more you listen to the guys, the only thing that I had is, okay, thanks for information. But no engagement at all, really. So, as I said, probably the game was inspired by Gravity Falls, and probably the main thing here are anomalies. Speaking about the anomalies, the very first anomaly that you see in the game is its performance. Please explain me something by why the game works so bad on PS5. Well, don't get me wrong, the game looks amazing, but there is nothing stunning that will just blow your mind out. It's just a usual game. However, the performance in almost every location is so disgusting. Generally, it feels like it is mostly below 30 FPS, but in some very hard locations where there are a lot of anomalies and a lot of lighting, the FPS can reach up to 15. I don't know if the footage will convey that, but what the fuck is that? And generally I found the technical part of the game is kind of bad, and I will touch on that later. The game can work in 60 FPS in a closed location like a tunnel. Amazing. And the problem with the FPS is not only about that it's just not very convenient and comfortable to see below 30 FPS in the game. It's because it significantly affects the gameplay, because when it's, for example, night or when there are a lot of anomalies, it really prevents you from the normal playing and from controlling your car or your character with such low FPS. It basically obstructs you from convenient playing. Getting to the core part of the gameplay, well, it's a survival game essentially, so you are traveling around, looting, crafting, finding new things and materials. And, well, there is nothing new, there is nothing bad about it, it's just good, well made. Honestly, I found very pleasing to improve and take care of my car, and for me, it was the very favorite part of the gameplay to take care after my metal friend. And honestly, every time I went on a trip and getting back, I was mostly thinking not about the main story, but about how I can improve the car, what improvements I can craft and install. I think this part of the game was done very well, and generally the car feels nice. I think what the writers couldn't make with the main story, but what they could make with the car is you actually connect to the car. And I felt that this is my friend, this is a thing that helps me, and I try to take care of it. There are a lot of things that you can craft and install in your car, and if in the beginning you start with a car that doesn't really have wheels and doors, in the end you end up with a car with many cool upgrades, and essentially you have developed it, you feel that it's yours. The only issue I found in the game related to it is the abundance of mechanics and how they work together in the game. And the problem is not their amount, but rather how they are presented to the player. In the first 2 hours, the player is dumped with all the ways of crafting, of traveling, of getting back to the garage, of crafting things in the garage, and the issue is that it is quite a lot, and from my perspective, it's not very well explained. So I'll be honest with you, it took me around 15 hours, maybe 12, so half of a game, more or less, to figure out how the system of crafting materials and installing things work. So, for example, for the most part of the game, I was driving without a hood, thinking that at some point I will find a material to craft a hood, find a blueprint to craft a hood. However, it appeared that I can just use default plate, but it's not very clear. And of course, these survival games always have this part of mystical that you have to investigate. But I think that in this case, it was even too much. It was on a level when you find out it, you feel like, oh, this way. Okay, what a stupid way this is. Really, I felt it that way. And honestly, speaking about the experiment, my idea was not to watch or read anything about the game. Actually, I cheated a bit because there were moments when I needed to craft certain things and I didn't know where to find the material. And I felt like I was finding the material, but I was not knowing where I got it. So I had to read a bit where to find it. I feel it a bit stupid because, I understand if you haven't found a material and probably the game should not tell where to find it. But if you have already found it, even by a mistake, why not to tell the player where to find it more? I feel like it was not really friendly in this regard. However, probably the main issue of the gameplay part is the traveling. So the idea is that you have a map of the zone, and the zone is divided in several locations. Well, in fact, into the many locations. And to get to the location, you need to sort of start a journey from a garage to this location. And the further location is, the more sub-locations you need to get through. The problem is, it takes quite a time. And, that's okay. You travel far in the zone, you go through different locations, you pick up some items, you loot in these locations. It's fine. However, when you go on a mission to some far location, usually the last part of the mission is to get back to the garage. And you get back to it using a teleport. The issue is, if you die going to the teleport, the game will get back you to the garage because that's the way it works. The car sort of protects you and you get to the garage. However, the game does not count this returnal to the garage as, well, returning to the garage. Essentially, what you need to do is you need to fix your car back again. Remember, most of the things that you lose during dying just disappear and your car gets destroyed. You need to fix your car and you need to go through all the locations to the final one where you died to, well, essentially use the teleport to once again get back to the garage. It's so stupid, it's so ridiculous, and it's so fucking time consuming. Honestly, such a trip may take up to like 40 minutes because, again, you just cannot just drive fast through the locations. No, driving takes some time. There are anomalies that prevent you from the normal driving. And you need to fix your car, you need to loot once again because probably have lost all your materials and you need to craft wheels, doors to facilitate the protection. This is very stupid once again, and I felt like the game completely does not respect my time. And that's why I felt like I could have finished the game much earlier, and probably the level of pleasure would be more or less the same, but that part was just freaking me out. As well as bugs. Cannot say that there are a lot of bugs in the game, but some of them are just kinda irritating, and most of them are related to the car and to its physics. So for example, the car may jump at some point, or the physics might work in a weird way that it damages your car, and generally you already have spent a lot of time to fix your car and to build the elements, and when they get damaged and destroyed, you feel like, once again. So it constantly feels that the game does not respect your time. However, what I really liked and genuinely enjoyed is the atmosphere and the visual part of the game, because it really is what it looks from screenshots. It's quite a cozy atmosphere, it's nice music, it's nice visuals, nice nature, environment, especially in the near locations where there aren't a lot of anomalies and you just drive through the forest listening to some music, which feels amazing. And generally, I can praise the creativity part of the game because there are a lot of anomalies. Their design is very different, and the more you get into the zone, the more you see the weirder they are. So the enemies are very different. I feel the very huge creativity put into them, and I really appreciate that. Sometimes you just drive into some new location and you see something haven't seen before, and you're thinking like, whoa, what is it? I remember for the first time seeing an abductor on the very near location of mine, and I was genuinely scared because I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know who this is. I didn't know what it should do to me, and I tried to kill it. I tried to damage it, but it didn't really work out. So this part of the exploration of the anomalies worked pretty well. Again, I don't want to say that it somehow affects the story, but you just see new interesting things. That looks good. Having all that in mind, it's very hard to draw a final conclusion for the game, because it in fact leaves quite mixed feelings. On one side, the game is beautiful, the cozy environment, it's really nice to drive around, to listen to the music. The views are picturesque. I honestly would set some of them on the background of my display. On the other, there's a very shallow story that is not really interesting to follow. There aren't any interesting characters. You are not really engaged in anything here. And in addition, the gameplay, it's sort of okay. It's nothing special for the survival game. It's just good. However, the irritating moments, geez, so much time. I genuinely feel like I lost so much time on stupid things that could probably not be present in the game, but for some reason somebody decided that that would be a good idea to put them. And speaking about the experiment experience, I think it was just great, because despite me feeling sort of mixed about the game, I generally enjoyed the feeling picking something that I don't know and just exploring it by myself without having any other opinions involved. I probably will watch or read something about the game, but only after me finishing this video, because I'd like to have a complete opinion made inside my head. And I would probably recommend you to do something like that with some unknown game for you. You'd get a lot of pleasure, believe me.